So we're starting the second chapter of the book of Joshua, and we have just finished with the theme of this transition that the Israelites are making from a very miraculous existence to a practical, on-the-ground, actually entering the land of Israel existence, which is a major transformation. Also a transition from the leadership of Moses to Joshua, with this new era opening up. And last time we spoke about the transaction that was made with the 2.5 tribes and the concept of inheriting the land, and why they had to be first to fight if they had already inherited land outside of Israel. And what does it mean to inherit land outside of Israel? Now we're going to turn our attention to another practical matter, which is exactly what's the plan? How are we going in? How are we entering the land? This is a secret war before the actual war of conquest. We see from the opening lines of this chapter, Vayishlach Yehoshua ben Nun min Shittim. Joshua sent from Shittim, the area where they were encamped, Shnayim anashim miraglim cheresh. He sent 2 men, spies. It's actually miraglim cheresh. Now that means that this was done in secret. And the question that we have to ask is, why does Joshua send the spies secretly? When the last time spies were sent, it led to national catastrophe, if you'll remember from the sin of the spies. And why does the entire mission depend on one woman in the city of Jericho, who may be either a prostitute or the most connected intelligence broker in the city? This year is not about spies. It's about what happens when reality is already decided, but some people refuse to act on it, while others take a stand. So again, Vayishlach Yehoshua ben Nun, Joshua sent Shnayim anashim miraglim cheresh, 2 spies. Now the phrase is miraglim cheresh. The word cheresh generally is translated as deaf. The word miraglim is our word for spies. Miraglim has the letters Resh, Gimel, and Lamed, which refer to regel is a foot or a leg. These are people who go on foot to spy out the land. But they are miraglim cheresh. And the word cheresh generally means deaf. But in this sense, what it means is that they are to do this job silently, or as we might say today, covertly. Although we could ask the question, who is deaf to these people? Under Moses, if we look back in Numbers chapter 13, the sending of spies was a public mission with national involvement. Everybody knew that a reconnaissance mission was being sent. And ultimately, this led to fear, it led to collapse. And just an important clarification to make, because here we have Joshua sending the spies. In the case of the spies that we read about in the book of Numbers, we learned later on in Deuteronomy chapter 1 verse 22, Vatikrvun Elai kulchem, Moses says to the people, you all approached me and you asked, Nishlecha anashim lifanenu, let us send men ahead of us. Meaning that the initiative for the first spy mission came from the people themselves, not from Moses. The request to investigate the land did not come from a place of strength. Why do I say that? Because the inheritance of the land of Israel was already something that had been guaranteed. Not even to the generation of the desert, not even to the generation of those who came out of Egypt, but already as far back as Abraham. So why was there any doubt about this? Why was there a need for a reconnaissance mission? The first spy mission did not come from strength. It came from hesitation. It came from that place where faith is not as strong as it can or should be. So I mentioned this because I want to say that the failure of the first set of spies was not a failure of the emunah, of the faith of Moses. It was a reflection of the people's need for reassurance in place of a very strong faith that they could have inherited all the way from their forefather Abraham. Now, if we look in Numbers chapters 13 and 14, the spies that they send at that point returned with a very demoralizing report. And then the people in response weep and panic and they reject the land. They don't want to go in. They speak about returning to Egypt, which is really the absolute ultimate inversion, if you think about it. Because they had been miraculously taken out of Egypt and protected since then. And how could it even be? It's like to reverse time, to return to a much worse state. Then a rebellion forms against Moses and Aaron, and the ultimate result was an absolute disaster. It was a decree from Hashem that the entire generation who had come out of Egypt, who had merited to come out of Egypt, would die in the wilderness, in the Midbar. The moment that doubt takes over, history changes course. This was supposed to be an 11-day trip from Egypt to the land of Israel. And it took 40 years because of that incident. So there's a certain principle that we see in the book of Psalms. In the first chapter, verse 6, Ki yodea Hashem derech tzadikim. Hashem knows the way of the tzadikim. V'derech rishayim toved. But the path of the rishayim, the evil doers, is to be destroyed. There's a few different things that we take from this verse. The commentary Mitzudat David says Yodea, that Hashem knows. What does it mean? It means that Hashem actively oversees, guides, and directs the path of the righteous. We're speaking of a very strongly felt divine providence. The righteous are under directed guidance. However, the wicked are left to toved, to be lost on their own path without guidance. In other words, the more a person or a nation aligns with Hashem and places their trust in Him and believes what He tells them will happen, the more reality itself bends towards them. The less they do this, the more they are abandoned to chance, to fear, to happenstance, and ultimately to destruction. Metzudat David says over there that, what does it mean, Derech Rishayim Toved? It means that they are essentially abandoned to the elements. You think things are happening naturally? You want to live in a way that doesn't reflect Hashem's guiding power in every aspect of your life? You will experience the cruelty of nature. You will experience what appears to be a natural existence where things happen coincidentally. So here too, the Dor HaMidbar, the generation of the desert, did not lose because of military weakness. We see incredible things happen in the desert. The war with Amalek, and then the war with the Canaanite kings subsequently. They lost because they disconnected from the certainty that they could have had. So therefore, what could have been miraculous becomes natural. What could have been inevitable now becomes impossible. And this changes, this whole approach changes under Joshua. Under Joshua, the endeavor of sending spies is hidden, it's surgical, and it's only 2 men. The Malbim, who is one of the great commentators, gives a few different compare and contrasts between the first and second set of spies. The first mission, says the Malbim, is a mission of possibility, to inquire about possibility, to assess if conquest of the land of Israel is actually feasible. Now, again, when I say this, I don't mean in terms of Moses' role in this. I'm talking about the role and the perspective of the people who had asked for the spies to be sent. Okay? They wanted to assess if conquest is feasible. Those of us who have read the back of the book know Hashem already promised the Israelites the land of Israel. So feasible? We don't have to worry about feasibility. But the second mission, the one that Joshua sends, is just about execution. Just to plan how the conquest will be carried out. The first mission was a public mission. It was reported to the nation. It invited the reaction of the 3 million people that were there. The second mission was private. It was reported only to Joshua in order to preserve clarity, in order to keep that information and the integrity of that information together. The first mission was a mission that Klal Yisrael, that the Israelites had initiated out of uncertainty. And when we do things out of uncertainty, that opens space for fear and for interpretation. The second mission, completely different, is a mission that is operating under the rubric of certainty, operating within a fixed, promised outcome. Nobody is doubting that the Israelites are going to take the land at this point. The first mission introduces doubt. And you know what? This is how modern anxiety works. The more we try to reassure ourselves by taking every precaution, the more anxious we become. But the second mission, totally different. It operationalizes destiny. The generation under Moses sent spies to ask, can we conquer the land? Joshua sends spies because we are going in. Now we need to know how. This is leadership after failure. Now, let's think about Jericho for a second, the city of Jericho, because that was the port of entry. Jericho, at this point, is not just a city. It's a fortified border intelligence node. It has walls. Again, we're talking about the late Bronze Age. That's our time, our chronological context. So we're talking about city-states, trade routes. At this point in time, the influence of Egypt is now weakening in the region, and there's instability and fear across the land of Canaan, of Canaan. Jericho sits at a crossroads. Information flows through that city. And now we get to be introduced to a fascinating personality. See, one of the beautiful things about learning Tanakh is that we get exposed to profiles of incredible human beings. Generally, I think, I don't know what your experience is, but if you read this stuff in translation, it sounds like you're reading a Shakespearean play, you know. Yea, verily, and it came to pass, thee thou, wherefore this that goest, all of a sudden, like, it's so, we're so disconnected from it because it seems like just an ancient play. And meanwhile, you have to remember, it's something I thought about recently. Human beings have always been intelligent, just like we are now. Perceptive, observant, able to figure things out, able to make plans and execute them. People used to look up into the heavens and see the pattern of the stars, and they had an immediate GPS in their heads because of it. They knew exactly where they were and where they were going. They could tell which way the wind was blowing and which would be the right way forward. Today, we have technology that has replaced a lot of human ingenuity that helps us, in the day-to-day. But when we look at the Tanakh, pay close attention to the people that we are being introduced to. In Jericho is an incredible person, Rachav. Let's look at the verse again. So he sends these spies in secret. Lamor, he tells them, L'chu re'u et haaretz, go and observe the land, v'yet Jericho, and the city of Jericho. V'yelchu v'yavo beit isha zona. And they went, and they came to the house of an isha zona. Now, an isha is a woman. A zona, that's not a very nice word. A literal zona is, and this is how Rashi understands the verse, is a woman who is engaged in sexual commerce, often with access to elite clients, right? This is, as they say, the oldest profession in the world. Access to people who can give information. And also potentially a deliberate counterintelligence trap. If you think about it, back in Numbers chapter 25, we read about the Midianite strategy where Balak and Midian use sexual impropriety to ensnare Israel because they knew that this is a point of vulnerability and that Hashem absolutely despises sexual impropriety. We have the commentary of the Radak, who does not read the word zona in the same way, but rather as a hostess or an innkeeper. The word zona has the letters zayin and nun, zan, which can also mean sustenance, like mazon. The grace after meals is called birkat hamazon, the blessing of sustenance. So this is another possibility. Like a food truck in Israel would be called a miznon. If, in fact, she was a hostess or an innkeeper, she was a provider of lodging and provisions for travelers. So here she's also functioning as a public access point where news and secrets circulate. Either way, whichever way you understand that word, her house is a place where people talk. Nobles, travelers, officers, maybe other spies, ambassadors. This is the place where secrets get leaked. So if this is where Yehoshua, where Joshua sent them, it's because Rachav is not just connected. She operates at the level of actionable intelligence. And we'll prove that from her instructions once we ask the question, how did Joshua know where to send these people? Did he send them there? Did they go themselves? Did they figure out where to get the right information? Maybe that's how this went. Let's understand Rachav's level. Okay. So they come to her house and they lay there. The next verse is Vayomer lamelech Yericho lemor hine anashim ba'u hena halayla mi b'nei Yisrael achpor et haaretz. It's told to the king of Jericho that there are people who have come from B'nai Yisrael to spy out the land. Immediate detection. Immediate. Vayishlach melech Yericho el Rachav. So the king now sends word to Rachav, saying, Hotzia ha'anashim ha'ba'im elayich. Send out the people who have come to you, asher bo leveitech, who have come to your house. Ki lachpor et kol haaretz bo. The reason why they're there is to spy on the land. V'tikach ha'isha et shnei ha'anashim v'titzpeno. Now, what does she do? Does she send them out? No. She brings them up to the roof, and she hides them there. And she says, people have come to me. She says to the people, let's say, who have been sent by the king of Jericho, you're right, there were people here. It would have been silly to deny that. After all, it seems like everybody knows that information passes through her house. So she says, I just don't know where they are now. She's hidden them. Va'yi ashar lizgor b'choshech va'anashim yatso lo yadati ana halchu anashim ridfu maher acharem ki tasigom. So she tells the people sent by the king, look, the gates are going to close. I don't know where these people are. Run after them so that you can catch them. Now, she's hidden them under a bundle of flax that she has up on the roof. And the king's men go out in pursuit of these Israelite spies. Derech HaYarden al HaMabarot. This is exactly the place of the border where the spies have penetrated. And the gates close after the king's men have left. So now they're safe again. Now, before the spies sleep there for the night, she goes up to them. In verse 9 she says, Vatomer el ha'anashim yadati ki natan Hashem lechem et ha'aretz v'chi nafla imatchem aleinu. I know that Hashem has given you the land, and that the fear of you is upon us. V'chinamogu kol yoshvei haaretz mipnechem. That essentially everybody is terrified of you here. Now, we see, let's skip over to verse 12. V'ata hishavu na li b'Hashem. So swear to me in the name of Hashem, ki asiti imachem chesed, that I have done chesed, I've done kindness with you. V'asitam gam atem im beit avi chesed. And you should do kindness as well with the house of my father. Unatatem li ot emet, and give me a sign. And she's bargaining with them for the life of her family. That v'hechiyitem et avi v'et imi v'et achai v'et achotai. That you will allow my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters to live. V'et kol asher lahem, anything that is theirs, v'hitzaltem et nafshotenu mimavet, and that you will save us from death. She understands that there's an invasion coming, but she wants protection for her own family. This is a very clever person. Now, they say to her, Nafshenu tachtechem lamut, im lo tagidu et devarenu zeh, v'haya beteit Hashem lanu et haaretz v'hasinu imach chesed ve'emet. Which means that our lives are in your hands. If we don't do exactly as you say. Now what does she do? V'torideim b'chevel be'ad hachalon. She lowers them down by a rope from the window. Ki beita b'kir hachoma. Her house was actually located in the wall of the city itself, or against the wall of the city. Uvachoma hi yoshevet, and that's where she was situated. It's like a perfect observational point. Vatomer lahem hahara lechu, run to the hills, pen yifgeu bachem harodfim, lest the people that the king has sent to pursue after you, that you be overtaken by them. V'nach beitem shama shloshet yamim. Hide yourselves there for 3 days. Ad shov harodfim, until the pursuers return. V'achar telchu l'darkechem, and then go on your way. She lowers them through the window, she directs them to the mountains, and then she instructs them to hide for 3 days. What do we see about Rachav? She knows patrol routes. She knows search durations, the whole schedule. She knows how the king's men operate. This is not just a bunch of rumors. This is actionable intelligence. If these people came to Rachav, it's because this is not a random house. This is a node inside the city's operational flow. And we see from the second verse, that they were detected immediately. The city is not asleep. This city is watching. This city is afraid. Before a single arrow is fired, Jericho already believes it's under attack. Psychological war is already won. The psyop has already happened. Now the question would be, where does that psychological collapse come from? It doesn't come from this moment, but rather everything that the people of Jericho have already heard, processed, and feared for decades. Let's go back to what Rachav said to them. She says, verse 9, Yadati ki natan Hashem lechem et haaretz. I know that Hashem has given you the land. V'chi nafla imatchem aleinu, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us. V'chi namogu kol yoshvei haaretz mipnechem. Essentially, the word namogu means like the hearts of people have melted before you. But what is she talking about? Why are they so afraid? What is the issue here? So she says, Ki shamanu, because we've heard, et asher hovish Hashem et mei yamsuf mipnechem. We've heard how Hashem dried up the waters of the Yamsuf, of the Red Sea, mipnechem, before you, but seitchem in Mitzrayim, when you left Egypt. V'asher asitem l'shnei malchei ha'emori, and about what you've done to the 2 Amorite kings. This is Asher be'ever hayarden, who live on the other side of the Jordan River. L'sichon la'og. We read about this at the end of the book of Numbers. Asher hecharamtem otam, that you destroyed them. Now, and finally, v'nimas libeno. Once again, I'm sorry. V'nimas livaveno, and our hearts melted. Just a recounting of those things. The information has reached Canaan. So I want to point something out. The events that we're talking about here, especially the splitting of the Red Sea, at the time, sorry, just a tickle, I'm sorry. You'll have to splice that out. The events that we're speaking about over here, specifically the splitting of the Red Sea, for example. These events are 40 years old by the time Rachav is relating them. What does this mean? It means that the land of Canaan has been living in fear for decades. Everyone knows about this. Everyone knows what's coming. Only Rachav acts. And she says, this is the most revealing line of all. Verse 11, V'nishma v'yimas livavenu. We heard and our hearts melted. V'lo kama od ruach be'ish mipnechem. And there will not be a fighting spirit in anybody before you. Ki Hashem Elokeichem hu Elokim b'shamayim ma'al v'al ha'aretz mitachat. Because the Lord your God is the Lord in heaven above and on the earth below. And with credentials like that, who's going to stand before you? So in other words, Rachav has a very deep understanding of Hashem. This isn't information that she's telling them. What do they need to know that for? These people are coming from B'nai Israel. But this is an expression of Rachav's connection to this spiritual reality which she knows. And if you think about it, it very much echoes the same breakthrough in perception, in emunah, in faith, that we saw by Jethro in Exodus chapter 18, verse 11, where Jethro says, Ata yadaiti, now I know, ki gadol Hashem mikol ha'elokim, that Hashem is greater than all gods. This isn't a report that she's giving them. It's a statement of her recognition that leads to action and connection. In other words, there's really two types of people. There are people who know what the truth is and they freeze. You know, Jericho has had many decades to prepare for this. And there are people who know the truth and they act. Jericho has knowledge, but they don't have courage. Rachav has knowledge, and she takes action. And I think what we can understand from this is that faith is not about knowing. It's about acting on what you already know. Now, the pact that she makes with these spies, here are some of the core elements of the agreement. First of all, it's an oath that she wants them to take in Hashem's name, which is binding. It's not an informal oath, and it's measure for measure. Chesed ve'emet, kindness and truth. She saved them, they must save her family. It has a defined scope. Her father, her mother, her siblings, her entire household. They in turn say, we will do this for you, but then they clarify. And this is very important to make it operational. They say, look, we're going to be completely free of this oath unless you act in the following way. You have to mark the house. You have to place a chut hashani, a scarlet cord in the window. You have to gather inside. Your entire family must be inside the house. There's no exit. Anybody who leaves during this invasion will forfeit the protection that they're supposed to have. And finally, the whole thing has to be done in secrecy. Do not expose the mission. It's not just a nice sentimental agreement made between parties. It's a covenant that actually has operational terms. So mercy is granted to this family of Canaanites, but it's structured, it's conditional, and it's accountable. In other words, salvation for Rachav and her family is not automatic. It requires alignment and obedience to the terms that are set. And that alignment becomes visible in this one unmistakable sign. If we read in verse 18, Hine anachnu ba'im ba'aretz, et tikvat chut hashani hazeh tikshari b'chalon. So we're coming, tie this scarlet thread to the window, asher haratanu bo, that you had lowered us from, v'et avich v'et imech v'et achayich v'et kol beit avich ti'asvi elayach abayit. And then they go through the terms. But this is a very interesting phrase, tikvat chut hashani. Why didn't they just tell her to put a scarlet thread in the window? It's called tikvat chut hashani. Now the word tikva very often means hope. Why is this word being associated with this scarlet cord that she's supposed to tie there? Rashi tells us that tikvat is from kav, which means a line or a cord. It refers to the cord itself. So it's an actual physical marker. It's an interesting thing, isn't it? That during the plague of the firstborn, the Israelites had to mark their doors with scarlet blood. And here she marks her house with this scarlet cord. The Radak says tikvat carries the sense of a line that has been stretched and extended. So it's not just a physical marker that, okay, there's the red thread, that's her house. It's a visible boundary marker which identifies the house. The Metzudat David emphasizes that this is a functional sign. It's a clear, recognizable cord placed outward as an identifying signal. And the Malbim relates to this sort of dual idea that it's a kav, it's a cord, as a physical sign, but it's also tikva. It's also hope, meaning to say that it's a sign of the inner state of the people who are there. We've made a pact, and I have a sense of hope that we're going to survive the invasion because of this bond that we've created together. So the same word is encoding both an external marker and an inner reliance. And there are more mystical ways to understand this, but we're not going to go into that now. The same word means accord and hope. What's the hope? What are we talking about? That we have to look back to what she said before. That I know that Hashem is Lord in heaven and earth. It marks her house outwardly. It expresses what she has chosen inwardly. She's publicly declaring with this scarlet thread, I am no longer part of Jericho. Anyone can see it. It's an irreversible expression. Chazal tell us something even more radical about this woman. In the Gemara in Megillah 14b, we discover that ultimately Rachav converts, that she marries Joshua, and that prophets descend from this woman. She becomes, in the words of Deborah, a mother in Israel. This woman, from the inside of the moral and political network of Jericho, becomes part of the leadership of Israel. So now we're not talking about survival. We're talking about a complete revamping of reality itself. She doesn't just escape history. She joins the side that writes it. Now, at this point in the story, Rachav is not Israel. This is the Noahide dimension here. She has no inherited covenantal identity, no Sinai, no national memory of miracles, only what she's heard, no tribal belonging. But she does what the entire nation of Canaan cannot do. She recognizes Hashem's presence in the world, and she reorients her whole life around it. We have recognition. She doesn't receive new information. She takes what everyone already knows and she treats it as a binding truth. She makes a decision, a unilateral break from her own society. There's no committee, no consensus, no safety net. She takes risks. She's committing treason against her own city. Just think about it. The spies come in. The king knows exactly where to send his officers. She hides them. She instructs them how to disappear. If she's discovered, she dies. And probably her whole household. And we can see from how she expresses herself that she doesn't just believe in Hashem in an abstract way. She aligns herself with the people who are bringing that reality into history. And also we see that she enters a covenant, she follows conditions, she marks her house, she gathers her family. It's a strategic plan. Just like the B'nai Yisrael are coming with a strategic plan on how to enter the land of Canaan, to transform that into the land of Israel. It's a discipline. She's not saved because she feels something. She's not saved because of a nice emotional experience. She's saved because she has the sense to follow through with what she knows is true. So I say to my Noahide brothers and sisters, you might not be of the nation of Israel, but you're absolutely accountable to what you already know to be the reality of this world and who runs it. You don't need the same covenantal inheritance as Israel to recognize that ein od milvado, that there's no one and nothing other than Hashem, and to take responsibility for your relationship to that. Truth isn't something that's inherited. It's something that's chosen, that's recognized, and then it's lived. Rachav becomes great, not because of where she comes from, but because of what she was willing to connect herself to. Now, we know, because we live in them, that there are societies that know and they see and they understand what's going on, and they still refuse to act. And there are individuals inside those systems who do become aware of the spiritual reality of the world, who break from their own backgrounds and take the risks that those transitions involve. People who are willing to do that are the ones who make history. They don't have to belong to a majority. It can be the individual making that decision for themselves, taking that stand. You know, the walls of Jericho in many regards are still standing in our own personal lives. But in reality, it's already over. There are moments when the outcome is already determined. You know, a society, a system that's falling apart even though it looks stable. Moral realities that everyone recognizes but avoids. They avoid talking about it. Or personal situations that you know are unsustainable, but you keep maintaining them. The only question is, who inside Jericho knows it, and who's willing to act on it? Think about a person who knows a business or career path is failing, but they delay the necessary move. Or a relationship dynamic that everyone can see is broken, but no one points the finger at it. You know, what we call the elephant in the room. Or a society that knows that a threat is real, but they choose denial over response. Rachav is that incredible one who does not wait for the collapse. She moves before the walls fall. She connects to Hashem early. She gets in early when it's still very costly to do so. Right? I mean, most people make changes only when they're forced to. But this amazing woman changes as soon as she understands. And that is why Rachav doesn't only escape Jericho. She rises beyond it. And we'll continue this journey next week.